our next guest, Brad Kearns. I read his bio and actually prepared a lot for this show, which is something I generally don't do. As you know, Ralph always makes fun of me that I don't prepare for the show. But Brad's bio was really interesting, and I'd be an idiot not to be honored to have somebody with his experience, not just knowledge, on the show. So let's jump in with Brad Kearns. Brad Kearns, Kearns. Ralph would usually tell the audience everything that you do, but I don't have that kind of memory. Why don't you introduce yourself and do that for us?
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Marcus. I love what you guys are doing too, and I'm glad we connected. So I'm out there trying to live a healthy lifestyle, and my background is as an athlete, and my goal now, way past my career as a professional on the triathlon circuit, is to maintain that athletic focus and that competitive passion for the rest of my life. So I had that 9-year phase where I got to realize a childhood dream and be a professional athlete. And I competed on the pro circuit. I had some good success. I was national champion. I was ranked number 3 in the world at my best. And I also got my butt kicked a lot and learned some hard lessons, especially about trying to balance your health as you're pursuing these challenging athletic goals at the elite level. And it was a constant challenge to try to stay healthy and not cross that red line into breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury when you're trying to go for those incremental gains and improvement. And so I'm really interested in conveying a great message to eat healthy and also to approach these fitness goals in a well-balanced manner. And unfortunately, what I see in today's fitness movement and the trend is there's a lot of people who are really into it. They're devoted, they're passionate about it, and they tend to overdo it or pursue programming that's ill-advised for the average person. It's too strenuous, and you burn out, you get tired of it. You check in with the person a year later or 2 years later, and they're completely out of the running scene after they did the New York City Marathon and everything was great. Or they're going to these early morning workouts for the most motivated and driven people, and it's just too challenging, and it doesn't progress the fitness in a nice, gentle manner where you're integrating it with a healthy, balanced lifestyle. So I'm got all kinds of messages of how to go hard.
It sounds like, and I say this in a joking way, it sounds like you're very attached to the people you're trying to help, whether or not they get long-term results.
Yeah, long-term results is a nice goal, but interestingly, if you're going to get someone to engage in lifestyle transformation, you also need that instant gratification. So it has to be fun and rewarding the very day or the very moment that you're doing it. Otherwise, there's going to be no adherence long term. And that's what we see with dieting. People are on a strict diet. It's going well for 12 weeks with the bridesmaid gig coming up in the summer. And then everything falls apart because the diet's unsustainable. It's not enjoyable. So we're always, learning from experience that, hey, I can spout a bunch of information about this is how you should do it and this is the best way to exercise. But if it's not enjoyable to the individual, then forget it. So we have to kind of march our own path, see what works for us, but honor these big picture principles, especially when it comes to how to exercise your body, how to balance stress and rest. And then on the diet side, we talked a little bit off camera where, there's all these different factions out there. There's so much great information and so many positive attributes of the paleo diet or the plant-based or whatever it is that you choose and you're passionate about. But the common ground is that we're eliminating these nutrient deficient, heavily processed modern foods that are killing us in droves because they're such a centerpiece of the diet. And I like to focus on 3 of them. I call them the big 3. It's the refined industrial seed oils that are ubiquitous in all processed foods. Those are the things like canola oil, canola, corn, soybean, sunflower, safflower, things you see on the box on a labeled product, the deep fried stuff that you get at fast food, but also in most restaurants, even your expensive entree is cooked in these nasty vegetable oils, they call them, or industrial seed oils. And then the other 2 are refined grain products and refined sugars and sweetened beverages and things like that we're overdosing on to the extent that it's just messing up our metabolic health, and we have no chance at health and vitality and longevity until we take those basic first steps to get rid of the junk food.
Hallelujah. Well, we found the first thing that we have in common, and you said it in a new and interesting way. For me, you got very specific. And there's a lot to unpack in the first 3 minutes of everything that you said. First of all, I want to say that in your bio, you admit openly to being older than 50. And so we have a YouTube audience, but most of the people can't see you. So they don't, from the sound of your voice, you could sound like you're 30 to 50 easily. So do you disclose your full age out there into the media stream?
Of course, man. I'm 56. I'm proud of it. I used to spout that one liner that age is just a number, and then someone corrected me one day a long time ago, and they said, you know what, it's not just a number, and if you think that, then that could be a flawed mentality. So I fully respect my age and all the adjustments and recalibrations that I have to make, because I'm not a 27-year-old racing on the pro circuit anymore, and that is a little tough because I still have that competitive edge where I want to go out there and push it and do a great workout, but you have to respect that you got to do right for your body and listen to those signals and signs. And I know it takes me a lot of time to recover now, more so than it did before. However, in many ways, I'm fitter and stronger and have a more broad-based fitness competency than I did when I was racing on the pro circuit, because back then I was good for nothing except for swimming in the water in a straight line, getting on the bike, pedaling, and then getting off and running in a straight line. And now my competitive goals have turned over to sprinting and high jumping. And so I'm obsessed with this crazy sport of high jump, and I've highly ranked in the old man's category, mostly because it's a competition of attrition where there's not many guys jumping up in the air and bending over the bar when they're in the 55 to 59 division. So last year, before COVID hit, I got a meet in. I had the number one height ranking, so I proudly stand there in the 55 to 59 division and love competing against other people who are keeping the dream alive even as they advance through the age groups. And in fact, in age group competitions in many sports, people are celebrating the jumping into the next 5-year increment. So instead of being sad about turning 60, it's like, oh, now bring it on. Let's go 60 to 64.
You're a Joff. You're a Joff. I call you a Joff. You're jumpers over 50.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'm happy to join.
There's a lot here. There's so many things. So first of all, I'm 52. And I just want to go back to the earliest thing that you said, which is, if we as humanity knew for certain where all this was going, let's say, for example, we just knew for a fact that when you died, it was a graduation to a higher grade, we just knew, there was no doubt, then the youth would be jealous. They'd be like, shit, that guy's close, right? So it's obvious that in the youthful mentality, aging is frightening because there's a lot of unknowns, and certainly there are some sufferings that come along with getting older. Obviously, we all understand that. But the truth is that we have to come to terms with the idea that, first of all, the gratitude that you could have been dead at 40. You could have been hit by a bus and dragged for 6 blocks. So the idea is credit to you for surviving in a dangerous world. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what we try to teach the youth is that our life is a constant equilibrium of an expansion and a contraction at the same time. As the body contracts, the mind is expanding, and so it's a transfer, and one isn't better than others. So in other words, at 52, the athlete that I am is certainly not the athlete I was at 27. But I certainly would never want to go backwards and have the mind that I had at 27. So I feel very content with the exchange. How do you feel about that?
Well said. That's right. And you got to think there must be some benefit to getting older. And for me, I think it's more perspective, more maturity, and how I face all kinds of things, relationships, career goals and aspects, managing the ego, right? Knowing how to kind of self-regulate better than a younger person. And so
character building.
Yeah,
character
building
building over
stuff.
time.
Yeah. And boy, when you start to formulate a negative attitude about aging, you manifest that into reality. This is, the work of many leaders in that manifesting field. It's like, whatever you say, you're right about it. So if you think this, this positive thinking if you think this positive thinking stuff is bullshit, you're absolutely right. And if you
it's so hard to teach people about positive thinking because they have negative thinking. So you have to trick them into that. It has to come slowly. And I learned that on two ends of the spectrum. I have a 14-year-old daughter that I'm trying to teach that to, and an 80-year-old father. And they're in the same place. And it's because they didn't practice it. And so I think about it from, I have to outsmart them. I can't take the front door and say, think positive, asshole. I have to trick them into understanding the concept. And oftentimes what I talk about from my highest experience of it, and there's been different experiences of it where I could look back to it, is when I used to fight competitive Thai boxing and I was preparing for a fight, two great fighters that were training in the same camp taught me to visualize success in the ring. And what that would do is it would offset the anxiety that would come up during an 8-week cycle of training. And I would just hyper focus on, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, see myself in the ring winning. And at the very least, it's what carried me through the experience without having anxiety or stopping what I was doing. And I also believe that in one or two of my fights, it's the thing that led me to win, because my mind was not in the ring with me. It was only my body, and I had convinced my body of what the outcome would be. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I love it. Yeah, it's tricky. And, one of the things I learned from that athletic experience where the results, the success and failure are so dramatic and intense compared to maybe another endeavor, I had to learn this hard lesson of releasing one's attachment to the outcome. So you don't want to attach your self-esteem to the outcome, whether you win or lose. You want to come back to the next race and be fearless and not be afraid of winning and not be afraid of losing. But it's just a matter of putting it out there, doing your best. And I kind of carry that forward into even my career ambitions. We just wrote a book. It's a very hard job to work on a book. You put your heart and soul into it. And a lot of people, if you're going to be attached to the outcome, you're going to be sorely disappointed that the book doesn't sell to the numbers that you want. And then sometimes when you have, great success, material success in life, it can mess up your head, as we see with celebrities and athletes who are, blowing up their personal lives because they're not managing their material success well, because their self-esteem is so attached to the outcome. Now they're the king of the world rather than just another person who walks and talks and breathes. So it's nice to keep an even keel, and then just that will unlock the greatest potential for competitive success anyway, when you come in there with a blank slate rather than that anxiety that you're going to be a failure if you don't come through on this particular endeavor.
Were you always a positive guy, or are you coming from a place of childhood trauma? Did you have addictions in your youth that you overcame? Give us some more personal deets.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I really appreciate how we can speak freely about all these things. And I've been so inspired by people with their stories of, setbacks and tragedies and things like that. And I don't have anything of the sort. And I, have great parents and great siblings and, all smooth sailing. But then you have to sit back and think, well, everyone's been through hell in one way or another. And so all of us have had, times in life where we really had to struggle, and not even to make light of it. I mean, people who have, certain mental illness where you look at them and say, what's your problem? You have everything you could ever want for in life, and you still drove your car into the tree. That's because they're enduring pain and suffering just like a cancer victim. So I kind of try to keep that perspective that, boy, we better be thankful for every single day and not hold on to any baggage from whatever wrongs that have happened to us throughout our life, or whatever things that didn't work our way. Back to that comment about thinking positively. I mean, probably everyone could get on and tell a 5-minute story about how, I was cut from the basketball team in high school, and I was so mad I went out to the long distance running cross country and I kicked everybody's butt. And so I guess I'd found my sport, but it was from like this place of rage that I deserved to be on the team that I wanted to be on. But all that stuff's just fun and games. But you want things to drive you and push you and challenge you. But I feel like being motivated with joy and gratitude and those things that you spoke about, when, hey, whatever age we're at, I'm so happy to be out there on the track. It's my sensation, Marcus, when I clear over the bar, of the empty high school track that I had to sneak into and climb the fence during COVID because it was closed. There's no one there. No one sees me. And I scream for joy that I've achieved this goal. And it's no different than when I won the national championship and was on ESPN and got a big giant cardboard check and, had a lot of attention and recognition from the outside world. It's the same sensation deep inside that I've worked hard for a goal and I've achieved it. And I don't care who's watching or who's not watching.
Well, you sound like a really normal person in a lot of ways to me. I'm listening intently. Not that I'm a psychiatrist or anything like that, but I got sober when I was 15. I'm 35 years sober, and
wow, that's pretty early to get sober, man.
It is. It's
usually when people start.
It's a wild story, and I would say that I'm lucky in a lot of ways of how my story ended up concluding. Versus, I'd rather have not had gone through that stuff, but my route to your way of thinking was circuitous. I wouldn't say that it's coming from, my. Sorry, guys. I wouldn't say that my path to the same way of thinking was a straightforward path. It wasn't easy, and I write a lot about that stuff now because I kept journals along the way, and I think deeply about how to help other people that are able to get into self-help, because that's really the field that you and I are in. We're in the self-help field, and I distinguish it from the field where, like you mentioned before, where there's people who their mind is not open necessary to a natural healing on their own. They might need some type of intervention, which is beyond the scope of what you and I do. And I even believe, though, with that type of more advanced intervention, the individual is participating to some degree rather than throwing themselves off a bridge. But let's say the stuff that I'm writing now, there's an assumption that if a person found their way to a book on diet, that they're already at a very important benchmark, and they have to give themselves credit and understand that aspect of self that found that book in the first place. So in other words, even if the book was just dribble and it was 600 pages of don't do this, don't do that, the fact that they kept that book on their end table is part of their progress. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's well said. And I've written a lot of books and communicated a lot of information about training. I've coached people for years. And you start to, when the smoke clears and you realize that, the power of my voice and my enthusiastic message will only, resonate when that person's ready to receive the message and bringing all that they have to the table. And so I think now with the internet and our access to information, almost everybody has all the information and knowledge they need to succeed. And then it comes over to mindset and habits and creating the winning environment. So I've started to pay more attention to those things, especially in my own personal life. My big pet peeve these days is hyperconnectivity and the constant potential for distraction with technology. And, both of us in our age, we can reference half of our freaking lives where there was no internet or mobile devices to distract us.
Yeah, and but so we always had distraction. It did. I think about the distraction they had in the medieval times, and human beings are fantastic at creating distraction from the things that we are naturally allergic to. Boredom. Boredom is a great mental defense to make sure that children get up and do something and learn, right? And I think also I was talking to my dad about this today, is anxiety kept at bay is another great natural defense, because there might be something wrong today, and surviving on this planet is not a shoe-in. You got to actually do stuff. It's the over-exaggeration of these things that becomes a problem. It's boredom with no cure, anxiety with no cause. That's really the problem. And I really believe that all of this stuff has its root cause in childhood. It has to. Everything is cause and effect. In your particular case, what you're describing to me, and I write about this now, is that in childhood, I believe that we're such adaptive creatures, and we're actually designed to heal, that we have a given percentage of a margin of error in childhood. So in other words, if I look back at your entire childhood, I'll find a bunch of shit. There was maybe you waited a little too long once to get your diaper changed, or maybe you acted out and someone cracked you in the face, or there was somebody that didn't like you. There's always something in the childhood, but we have a margin of error. I can't tell you the percentage. Let's say it's an 80%. If you have an 80% great childhood, here you are, Brad Kearns, right? The idea, though, is that if you look at the symptoms that exist on the planet today, let's start with warfare and mass murder and whatever problems that we have with environment, widespread depression, a lack of focus, confusion. One would easily say that the root cause of the problem is not that human beings are defective, because we're not. We're perfect at birth in what we have as tools to adapt. You would say it's a flaw in our child rearing practices as a collective. And so that's a big area where I see there's a need for people like you and us to effectuate change.
Yeah, I'm interested in this theme. Is becoming more and more prominent that you have this window of time from age 0 to 7, and that's your childhood programming. Then you carry that programming with you the rest of your life. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, he talks about how we're operating from subconscious patterns 93 to 98% of the time. So we're walking through life basically as zombies and reacting with this programming that was initially imprinted in childhood. And so the idea of becoming mindful and conscious and, counting your breaths before you respond to someone who's triggered you, all those kind of things are really valuable, because it's so easy to just get locked into the pattern where you don't even realize it. And it's like, hey, how come you haven't adhered to your exercise program? Well, your programming says deep down that you don't deserve it, and you're going to be the martyr for everyone else, or whatever's going on, beneath the surface that we need to look at.
I can tell you when you're done with that thought. I think that I can elaborate on that theme. I didn't want to take away.
Let's hear it, man.
Okay, so first of all, obviously anybody can come up and say age 0 to 5, age 0 to 7, but let's look at the reality. We're highly impressionable creatures from 0 to death. Trauma can happen at any time and change us 180 degrees in the way we think. 74, my mother's childhood friend, her daughter is missing in that building that collapsed in Florida. She's 74. Certainly that trauma will affect her for the rest of her days. The most formative years, obviously, are 0 to 2 years. And then in each stage there, as you graduate better in each stage, like a child who gets perfect nurturance from 0 to 2 will be more adapted for flaws in 2 to 5. And if you get what you need at 2 to 5, you're more adapted for 5 to 7. But we are highly, highly sensitive creatures, let's say up until age 18, where we can take control over the circumstances of our lives. Before that, we are pinballs. We're being bounced around, and we're oftentimes victimized. We don't have choices. There's injustices. There's unfairness, and we don't have control. So I look at it more from the lack of control years to the control years. That's where the big difference in the shift is, where you can obviously say, I'm leaving an abusive home, et cetera, et cetera. So the work that I concentrate people on is to understand that the primary root cause of all of our dysfunctions is the early anxiety that we felt throughout our lives surrounding either unmet needs and traumas, which triggered anxiety. The anxiety goes from being acute to chronic. And then in that discomfort, that pain that we feel, we look outside of ourselves for something to cause soothing. And unfortunately, in our modern world, we have such a myriad of absurd things that we can latch onto, from drugs and alcohol, bad diet, sex addiction, money spending, exercise too much, you name it, the gambit of 3,000 types of addictions. Those addictions would not be prevalent if they didn't work at first. They are effective in soothing the anxiety. When a person is in active addiction, that is when they go to sleep, and that is when the unconscious realm takes over. That's the zombie that you're talking about, because you're not actively present in the moment. You're actually acting out, which is the dysfunction. And so the breakthrough is to become aware that that's happening. And to really have a meaningful effect on someone's diet, like somebody's ready. I'm ready to do this. I don't see how anything could be effective if a person doesn't simultaneously do some childhood work where they identify some of the early sources of anxiety and they find those emotions and they learn to talk about them and set them free. And it's a slow inward job. There's no silver bullet. How do you feel about that, sir?
Yeah, I like it, man. The more, the more personal work you can do, and to have the interest in that to begin with, there's no failure or setbacks on this path, because everything you do is going to, lead you forward and, give you more enlightenment. So even if it's painful, and we all know that it can be really painful to go examining and unpeeling the layers, but yeah, that's what it's all about.
People have to be careful and not mistake my meaning that a person should dwell or live in the past. That's a mistake as well. But that's actually what most people are doing. And you can look at their symptoms and their behavior. Their behavior is a sign that they are a slave to the patterns of their past. And so a way through it is the transformation of the feelings from negative to grieving, to feeling, to sadness, to acceptance, to moving forward, to learning new patterns. So let's jump for a second. I asked you off camera about some of the things that you're working on, and you told me about the book. Can you tell me the name of the book again and talk a little bit about what the content of that book is, what the theme is? Because I'm very excited to talk to new authors. All right, you got a book called 2 Meals a Day. Wow.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Well, it's so numeric. Title. It's so numeric. I love when people enumerate things. It's so enlightened. So what's the theme of the book? To have 2 meals a day, basically.
Well, I've written so long with Mark Sisson, and we've had a string of books for many years now, communicating generally the message. You could call it the ancestral health theme, where we're trying to honor our genetic expectations for health, eating like our hunter-gatherer ancestors. This is, the natural foods of the earth, and boy, that can welcome someone who chooses to be plant-based or chooses to be carnivore style, or any of these new popular themes, primal, paleo, keto, all kinds of things are floating around there. But the essence of it is that we want to eat the natural, nutritious foods that come from the earth and are minimally processed. And so the title 2 Meals a Day addresses this new concern, where we've been so obsessed with our food choices and, the particulars of how many macronutrients, what's our profile between protein, carbohydrates, and fat.
So stupid.
But we're seeing a pattern that basically the problem with the modern human diet is that we eat too frequently. And of course, we eat a lot of the wrong kinds of foods. So to talk about this meal frequency and bring that into the question with the discussion of how to eat healthy foods, of course, but we also want to get good at burning stored body fat as our primary source of energy, rather than relying on external feedings, which is kind of the essence of modern life, is these regular regimented meal patterns where if you skip lunch, you start to feel foggy and exhausted in the afternoon and you need a quick pick-me-up. And that's an indication that you're on this carbohydrate dependency train, because we have this, modern grain-based high carbohydrate diet. We're stuffing a lot of carbohydrates in the mouth. A lot of them are processed. They spike glucose, spike insulin, and lead you down this energy roller coaster that has all kinds of adverse effects, including lifelong accumulation of excess body fat, the metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, these patterns that are coming up in epidemic proportions. So if you have to
set wrong carbohydrate loading. Because I always scream very loud that we are carbohydrate burning machines, biologically, anatomically. And also, I just want to go back to something that you said, is that when we look at our ancestors, there were people that were hunter-gatherers, there were people that were hunter-hunters, and there were gatherer-gatherers. There was a diversity. It was never just one thing. Our ancestors are not just hunter-gatherers, and a lot of our ancestors were carnivorous. A lot of our ancestors were herbivores. A lot of our ancestors are omnivorous. And so what we could see is that what the human being does well is it adapts to its environment, and it adapts to the availability of certain foods. And we would say is right now, more than ever, we're going through a major shift because what we have to adapt to is to the proliferation of processed food, the perversion of our environment, the increase of stress, the lifestyle that we live, sedentary lifestyles, enclosed in architecture and clothing. So now more than ever, we cannot afford to make the mistakes that our ancestors had no choice to make in their diet.
Okay, yeah, and the mistake would be eating too much food,
or high protein diets past a certain age. We could obviously break this down. We can't do it again because I just had 2 episodes in a row where I got highly molecular, and I think we're going to lose the audience interest. But we could say that what's amazing about the human chemistry is that we can adapt to, like our mentalities, we can adapt to a certain degree of mistakes. We have a margin of error in our diet. So let's just make up a number and say that if 80% of what you're doing for your physical fitness is right, the mistakes that you make are okay. If 80% of your diet is right, then the 20% mistakes is okay. Now, obviously, that's abstract because how would you measure those percentages? Because someone says, yeah, I'm 80% raw. I go, by calories or by weight, by look on the plate? How do you measure it? And then they look up in the sky and they realize it's very abstract what they're saying. But our ancestors, unfortunately, didn't have supermarkets sometimes. And so when food was scarce, they had to go with what they had to go with. And one could easily say, well, if that community had centaurians that lived 100 years, it wasn't necessarily because their diet was perfect. It was because they weren't eating processed food. Mm-hmm. They had very rich spiritual belief systems, and it's been proven that having belief systems affects the immune system and the chemistry in a positive way. They were very active. They drank clean water. They breathed fresh air. And also we know a lot of ancestral people that weren't very successful, that had a plant-based diet and they lived to 40, or purely carnivorous diets and they live to 40. So there has to be an understanding that there's no one ancestor that we can point to and say, you see, if we just go back to doing what they did 16,000 years ago, if we do that in 2021, we're going to be successful. It's not true at all.
Right. And I think there's another factor to add on to that, which is personal preference and the ability to enjoy your life and enjoy the meals that you're eating. And Mark, my sidekick, Sisson, has a great line where he says, I never eat anything that I don't absolutely enjoy. I never put a single bite of food in my mouth that I don't absolutely enjoy. And the connotation there is that there's a lot of opportunities to work on your fasting skills when you're traveling around on a road trip or in the airport and you don't see anything that's, nutritious and appealing to you. And so to kind of get out of this mindset that we need to go looking for all these special foods and meals in order to be healthy, when in fact the baseline, the human works at its most optimal state when it's in a fasted state. That's when our inflammation, our antioxidant production, immune function, everything is optimized when we're fasted. Of course, we can't fast for days and days on end. Some people can pretty well, but at a certain point you have to eat a meal, and then you can go choose a healthy, nutritious meal, one that you enjoy personally and that you've tested that works for you. So yeah, there's now some advancements in genetic science where certain people have more markers of the AMYL salivary enzyme, that they can digest carbohydrates better than the next person. And all those things are coming into the play. But mostly I think if we can just assess how we feel after certain meals and eating patterns, maybe it's learning to skip breakfast and delay your first meal until you're truly hungry, which is a popular strategy. If that works for you, great. And other people like to start their day with a power energy smoothie, and that's the first thing they do, and that works for them. So yeah, I'm really trying hard to get away from the dogma and the pointing fingers and saying, do this, because look at me and my six-pack. That's not going to fly too far. And
it works to a certain audience.
Right. If you're desperate, or who knows how you're going to categorize that. But
I'm shifting from officially from last week's episode to realize that one of the reasons why I can't make money in certain areas of health and wellness is because I don't actually stand for anything.
Mm-hmm.
I stand for the absence of something. So it's not, I want to be clear that I'm not a person who's saying, eat this way, do it this way. I could tell you what I believe is the science, and I could tell you what I've experienced in my life. I could make very compelling arguments. For example, I could probably tell you why, as well as the next guy, why fasting is such an important aspect of human health. I could break it down, and I'd like to hear your take on that first.
Well, I mentioned those processes are optimized. There's a term called autophagy, which is the natural internal cellular detoxification process that is upregulated when you're in a fasted state. Apoptosis is the programmed death of dysfunctional cells, and that is also a cancer-fighting strategy, which is known to, be upregulated when you're in a fasted state. So basically, I think the takeaway for the lay person would be that when your body's not having to be burdened with working hard to digest food, it can awaken other processes of repair and growth. And it's kind of like going to sleep is the best time to heal from your cold, right? So
finally,
that kind of makes sense.
Finally, a person out there who can say something. So I used to call it autophagy because that's how it's spelled.
Right.
And I'm not sure if you know who one of the pioneers of those. His name slips my mind. He wrote a book, and his science was autolysis. Are you familiar with that term?
No.
Okay, so his work was seen as ridiculous 40 years ago, and since his death, the closest we can get to peer-reviewed paper that's outside of what would be considered pseudoscience or quack science is the work that a Japanese scientist will do, and I'll have to post his name as well on the YouTube site. And I have it in my notes because I used to have it on my website at Juice Press. It was a gentleman who won the Nobel Prize, Japanese scientist, who did a extensive study that showed individuals who did a 3-day water fast before going on chemotherapy had a 70% higher success rate of survival than those who didn't. And what he proved was that in exactly 72 hours, the body had a mechanism, took 72 hours on average. Obviously, there's exceptions with people with certain types of disorders or illnesses, which, I mean, for the purpose of conversation, I can't cover every aspect of this, but in 72 hours, your body in its infinite wisdom in that starvation mode will automatically start to consume itself, but it will skip over vital organs. Like you're not going to wake up in 72 hours and your eyeballs are missing. What it does first is it goes through necrotic cells, which are dead cells, dying cells, abscesses, tumors. It goes through waste material in the body looking for a source of fuel. And what happens at the end of 72 hours is the body absorbs all the white blood cells in your system, and then the stem cells have to kick in and basically, like a hard reset, produce a whole new white blood cell account. And so it's unbelievable for the immune system. And so to translate it back to human diet is that it is definitely immune building to do periodic fasting for a certain amount of time. But from the perspective of not doing 72 hours, the benefit is, I always call it just eat on empty. Because what most people are doing in their diet is they're eating the way grazing animals eat, not the way humans were designed. They're eating all day. And so what happens is they're putting new food on top of old food, which means the old food might underdigest because, overdigest, or the new food might digest for too long. So they're creating a condition where they're either get indigestion, undigested material matter that goes through the system. They're not getting the maximum nutrients, or they're creating a situation where they'll become gaseous and bloated, and then the off-gassing gets into the bloodstream, which causes inflammation, or they're fermenting their food. And so the fasting state ensures that everything in your system has an opportunity to digest so that you don't get those off-gassing, which leads to the inflammation. Now, that's all pseudoscience because I don't know anybody, and I know a lot of people in the medical industry that can actually give me hard data that proves that. Do you know any data that proves that?
Certain aspects of that, I think, have been supported by research, and the exact description of it, we're just having fun on the show here. But I think the main takeaway point that if you can get good at fasting, and I should emphasize that, where you can't just close the cover of the book or press stop after listening to a great show and go out there and skip meals, because if you've been in a pattern where you've been eating regular meals your whole life, you're highly dependent on those external calories for energy. It's not going to go very well. You're going to feel like crap. You're going to get a headache. And if you really take it to the extreme, as we've seen on shows like The Biggest Loser or any type of crash dieting program, what's going to happen when you try to fast before you're ready is you're going to activate the fight or flight response, because it's a stressful event. The body perceives this low blood sugar that occurs when you skip a meal to be literally a life or death occasion, which it was back in the times when we had to, endure selection pressure. And so when you get into this fight or flight, fatigue, low blood sugar, cranky, they call it hangry, hungry, and angry together. Guess what? You're going to start kicking into the fight or flight response, and you're going to make your own source of glucose through this process called gluconeogenesis. That's the conversion of lean muscle mass into glucose for quick energy. And we've all been through this, because if you're in a personal family crisis and a hospital vigil for 7 days, and you're not sleeping and you're not eating, but you feel fine and you're wired and you're alert, or you're going through a breakup or something, you're getting ready for your IPO and you're working 14 hours a day and you're sucking down coffee and Red Bull and you're going and going and going, gluconeogenesis is being triggered to meet your energy needs in this emergency manner. But of course, we know where this story ends, and it ends in that familiar modern destination of burnout, because we can't tap into fight or flight too long for too often, or it's going to exhaust itself and you're going to be starving, you're going to overeat, you're going to sleep a lot, you're going to be too tired to exercise, and that wonderful crash diet that worked for 6 weeks and you got on the scale and you lost 8 pounds and then you lost 12 pounds, all that's going to unwind and you're going to be back worse than your starting point. And that's been proven.
Well, we'll say that it's all those things that are happening in the chemistry that lead to anxiety, and it's anxiety that made the person act out in the first place. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, that when a person feels anxiety and stress for too long and it becomes chronic, they need a source of relief. And so they go back to the source of relief, which is food. So it's almost like a loop that they have to get out of. But I something that you said, which I think is really important to mention from my experience, and this is where my experience has been, that a happy medium for people is juice fasting. Because in a juice fast, you're removing a lot of things. Certainly, you're taking away all the dietary mistakes because there's no digestion involved, very little digestion. And you can be in a high-calorie juice fast. You could be getting 1,800 calories a day, or you could be doing 900 calories a day, depending on your activity. But you're giving a person a baseline amount of nutrients in the form of carbohydrates mostly, and some protein and fat. And so certainly with getting other micronutrients, their chemistry is going to be signaled that they're not in dying mode. If you're getting vitamins and minerals, even if you're in a calorie deficit, your body might not go into the same panic zone. And so I've seen tremendous success for people in using a juice fasting system as a way to start learning about what to eat next, as opposed to a water fast or a dry fast. Have you done dry fasting?
No, I would never do dry fasting.
You got to try it.
That implies not drinking any fluids.
But you do it every night. You go to sleep. You do a dry fast for 8 hours, so you don't die. Dry fasting under the right guidance and experience for someone with your experience level and your mind strength would not actually be harmful. I would never tell people to dry. First of all, from the experience that I've had with my mentors, I've never seen anybody have a problem do a 3-day water fast, with the exception of people with very challenging mental problems, because they panic or they're doing it for the wrong reasons. But physically, a 3-day water fast is really just psychological. Not that much actually happens. And you have to do those right. You have to know what kind of water you're using. Distilled water in a true water fast. You're not using tap water, because tap water has all kinds of shit in it, obviously, and even has some nutrients in it that can slow down the process of being in a complete deprivative state. And also, when a person does a water fast, it's not a time to go to the gym and try to burn calories. You're not doing it for weight loss. It's a time to rest, turn the TV off. Even certain music becomes too difficult to listen to because you're in a real detox and a purification state. Dry fasting is for guys like you who have the experience and who can understand the value of 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days. And it's also comes from ancestral behavior. Forgive me, the Vision Quest. Have you heard of Vision Quest before?
Yeah, the term, yeah.
Well, there are communities of North American indigenous people that, as a rite of passage, they time it around certain times of the year to tie it to new moons, full moons, solstice, etc. Individuals in the community will literally go out into the woods and sit by themselves for 4 days. They don't sleep. There's no water. There's no food. They pray and they meditate, and they have sponsors back in the community who are drinking water for them and eating for them, and they're waiting to have a vision. So obviously all this stuff is abstract, but it's not new stuff. It's not stuff that I'm inventing. It's not stuff that is like, oh, it's a new fad. It's been practiced for thousands of years by pretty crafty people.
Yeah, sounds pretty wild.
Let's go. We'll do one this weekend if you want.
Yeah, Vision Quest. Anybody join us? Yeah.
Well, the Vision Quest that I was invited on, and I didn't feel up for it. Sounded too difficult for me. They actually hang you from the chest. They put hooks through your chest, and they hang you from a tree, and you just hang from the tree, and you wait for the skin to rip off and fall out of the tree. I felt like that, even for a guy as extreme as me, that was a little bit of like, what? Can't we just do like a cold water plunge or something like that? All right, listen, you were phenomenal, knowledgeable, great guy. Again, I would love to have you back on the show when Ralph's here, so that we could probably be more lighthearted and humorous. You have this great book out there, which I think is worth a read. I'd like to get a copy of it myself. I'm going to pay for it. And you mentioned offline that you have a supplement that you're promoting. Can you tell the audience about that?
Oh my gosh, if you want to connect with me, you can go look at bradkearns.com, and I have the Be Rad podcast talking about all matters of health, fitness, peak performance, aging gracefully, pursuing these great goals of longevity and happiness. And I bring in relationship experts also, because, I talk so much about health and fitness and eating and exercising. And if your life is not going well in the background, it's kind of like, there is a certain category of people that are running away from stuff and doing great athletically. But we want to get that whole picture going. So I enjoy connecting with guys like you who are, we're going off track a little bit. It's not just nuts and bolts. It's kind of philosophical and gives us, a lot of pause to think and reflect of how we can be a better person in every way. So yeah, the Be Rad podcast, that's easy to find, and my website, and boy, you can get entertained by all kinds of fun videos.
What's the supplement? What's the supplement that you got right now?
It's called MOFO, Male Optimization Formula with Organ. So it's appealing to the ancestral community who are trying to honor the traditional ancestral diet. And so you get freeze-dried animal organs in a capsule in case you're not akin to inclined to cook those much. And so it's just a superfood, extra nutrition. It's like taking a great multivitamin, and it's a lot of fun to promote things that I really believe in, but I'm always looking at that big picture, Marcus. So before I'm selling a book or a supplement or whatever, we want to make sure that we're in this all the way, and we have good intentions and positive attitude, and then the material and the path that you choose can really work.
Not me. I just want to make money at any cost.
Okay, then I'm sure you'll find those customers out there that just want to give you money instead of do the hard work. And that's a funny quip you just made, but boy, we got to really sit back and take a look, because I think a lot of people want to buy their way to health, fitness, weight loss, happiness. And it's something to kind of reflect that, I can't start I haven't worked out much during COVID because my gym closed. Gym closed. Okay, well, what about, going up the stairs to the 8th floor instead of getting on the elevator because it's quarantine anyway, and you can work out anytime, any place. And so I always like to challenge that, we need everything to be just right, and we need to go buy something so we can get in shape. Forget that.
Yeah, I agree. We have different types of customers. I could never be a personal trainer. I don't have the patience or that level of compassion. And also, I don't have the buy-in. I'm more of a drill sergeant. And I'm working with my dad. I declared myself his mentor today on the phone. I said, Dad, as your mentor, I'm telling you what to do. And what I told my dad to do is something that I now have a method with him, which is I'm having everyone that he knows text him that all he has to do is go downstairs to the gym 10 minutes a day. I'm breaking it down into smaller increments. And I realize how the brainwashing works. If he keeps hearing it from all angles, what will happen self-centeredly, narcissistically, in the middle of the night, sometime in the next month, my dad will wake up and say, I got to go to the gym for 10 minutes, and he'll think that he thought of it. So I've learned how to deal with that customer. And I've learned how his mind operates. And the compassion is the component now for guys like me and you. And I don't mean it from a sappy spiritual perspective, although I probably do. I really don't. What I mean it from a way of thinking of effectiveness. So what I've learned is that there's two ways that you can learn from a schmuck like me, Marcus Antebi. One is just fucking watch me. Just watch me, motherfuckers. Go look at shit and see what the shit that I'm doing. And if I'm lying, I'm dying. Watch me, and I am a role model in many ways. In many ways, I'm a schmuck. Don't do what I do and do what I do. Just watch what I do, probably the smartest way. The other way is I'm crashing through the front door. I'm not going to pussyfoot around and say, oh, if you like to do it this way, do it that way. No, I don't have time for that shit. I've been sponsoring guys in 12-step recovery my whole life, and I am not a paid therapist. I don't have time to work through 20 years of nonsense. I am going to tell you the way that I did it, the way that I think it works, and then good riddance to you. Go out there and make your mistakes. Go do it. So those are my two approaches, and what's good about that for me is I don't have anything beyond that to sell. I'd have to tone it down if I had lots of shit to sell because nobody would buy my shit. So I have to make a decision between how I want to present self-help versus commercialism. It's a very, I have to think about it a lot because the wrong commercialism could prevent me from speaking truth. Do you find that to be so? I know that we ended the show accidentally, but then I just revived it. I'm sorry. I want to see what your dilemma is on that.
Yeah, it's you don't want to, sacrifice your integrity, and we're basically being trained to in many ways as we navigate through the economic system, and so that's a challenge. It's really a constant battle, and I think I have a lot of thoughts about this, and one of them I reflect back to when I was an athlete, and I was very polite and modest. I didn't toot my own horn. I let my racing speak for myself. I'd go out there and do the hard work, and if a sponsor wanted to come to me, that was great. And then I sat back after several years into my career and realized that if you're not a self-promoter, you're selling yourself short because you're out there to motivate and inspire other people. That's all athletes are. That's why the great NBA players are making millions of dollars, because they do something for us. They make us happy. And, promoting yourself, there's nothing wrong with it. And so I had to learn to kind of separate my sensitivity and my ego, that I don't want to be one of those, those blowhards, and actually kind of turn into that person, because that's a way I can help others. The more I can promote and, talk about what I'm doing. Right now I'm trying to walk my talk and lead a healthy lifestyle. Right. And so I might as well, get as many followers as possible. And I don't mind people following me. And so it's kind of just a little twist in the mindset where you don't have to sit back and just criticize people who are blowhards, but you can kind of join them with honesty, integrity, and, see what happens. And if people are receptive, that's fine. And if they're not, I'm not going to hit them over the head.
Brad, it's been a tremendous pleasure for me to speak with you. Very humbling. I think you're a very knowledgeable guy. And when I look in your face, I say, you know what? This is what enlightenment looks like. It's so simple. You're not glowing. You don't have light coming out of your eyes. It's just really, you're a conscious person. You're awake. You're thinking about great stuff. You're sharing great messages. And I'm really excited that this program brought us together. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Good stuff. Good sugar, man. Fun times. Keep up the good work. Thanks for having me on.